My name is Monica Rathbun. I love performance tuning. Like if there's somebody's gonna stand up on their desk and like cheer when something starts to go faster, that's me. I absolutely love it. I'm passionate about it. I live and breathe everything performance tuning. So I'm gonna go over some of the stuff today having to do with Azure SQL Database. Again, Monica Rathbun, I work for Denny Cherry and Associates. I've been a DBA for blah, 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 20 some odd years. I started out as a lone DBA straight from college, learned everything and ran the Port of Virginia all by myself with zero SQL Server skills. So I had to learn it all on the fly. And then I became a consultant working for Denny. Then I worked for the largest coffee company, third largest coffee company, where I discovered this thing called espresso. And I also discovered a shot glass. I thought was a single shot of espresso, but it's actually a double. So my high energy self had two doubles, two shot glasses, full 4 times a day working for this company. So that's where I got my handle, SQL Espresso. I'm very high energy, regardless of the espresso. So can you imagine what it was on basically 8 shots of espresso? So that's me, SQL Espresso. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me LinkedIn. And I do blog. I'm very involved in the community, so I speak at lots of events, international, local, virtual, etc. So if you ever have any questions, that's where to find me. My presentation rules, I like to say this. We all learn for each other, so it's a two-way conversation. Feel free to raise your hand, ask a question, interrupt me. We do only have 50 minutes, so if I don't have time to answer that, or maybe I'm answering it later in my deck, I will let you know and we can certainly follow up for that. But there's things that I might say that did not work for your environment or caused an issue or maybe ended up costing you more money or something like that. That's information we can learn from each other. So feel free to interrupt and interject if we have time to do so, okay? So I like to kind of give an idea of what I'm gonna cover, hopefully cover. We're gonna talk about what Azure SQL Database is and kind of give an idea of what it is compared to the other offerings inside Azure, compared also to what is on-prem, and why a DBA is still needed. Then we're gonna talk about how to monitor, because when it comes into performance tuning, you need to have an insight of what's going on, not only right now, but last week, or that report that somebody just told you is running really bad, but it occurred last Wednesday. So now you gotta go back in time to figure out what happened last Wednesday, because obviously they didn't tell you about it as it happened. So monitoring and be able to see what's going on, not only now, but in previous windows, you need to be able to find that. That's number one. You gotta know your environment. You gotta be able to get to that detail. Where do you find it in Azure and what is available for you? Then we're gonna talk about queries. Queries is where I live and breathe. We need to identify the workload that's coming through. I'm gonna come in as a consultant knowing nothing about your data. I know nothing about the queries coming through. I just know you guys have slow performance. I need to be able to actually see the statements and the store procedures and all of the normal stuff that I would see inside my database on-prem. You have access to that information in SQL Database, Azure SQL Database. Where do you find it? How do you use it to get the detail that you need, including the query statement that was run, how many executions it happened, what are the runtime stats on that, how can I tie that back to Query Store on SSMS and get the really good meat details that I need to make things go faster, right? What indexes is it using? Is it a scan? Is it a seek? You can get all that from Azure SQL Database, just like you normally used to. Then I want to analyze my workload, right? We want to actually see what's going on, and we want to be able to get to the metrics like deadlocks and waits and blocking and all this great stuff that we're used to relying on as a DBA. That stuff actually exists in the cloud, and there is a missing piece for Azure SQL Database that a lot of people forget to configure. You can actually get to the deadlocks and the wait stats and the CPU consumption, IO consumption, all of that by enabling one thing inside your environment and taking advantage of it. And it's a missing link that everybody goes, where are my deadlocks? Where is my blocking? I cannot find those inside Azure SQL Database. Where the heck is it? I need it. It's actually there. You just got to know where to enable it. I'll show you. Then we're going to talk about readable secondaries. There's a sneaky little thing in there that gets me so mad. If you're smart, Hopefully you've kind of taken your workload off of your primary database, maybe put your reporting workload onto a secondary database, but when you do that, you lose something, and it drives me absolutely nuts, and we're gonna talk about that as we get to it, because I get frustrated every single time I realize it's a readable secondary and I can't get what I need. Then we're gonna talk about some automatic tuning. Yes, we actually get some automatic tuning where the engine wants to fix things for us, but I am a DBA that likes to do things myself, and I want control. So I know what I can turn on and get the intelligence and have it give me some insight on what the missing indexes are and different things that it has available. I'm going to show you. But I want to be able for it to script it to me, let me know that it might help, and then I can make some decisions and run it myself and implement it. So there's things that it will give you that. You can also make that automated, so it will automatically do that. Don't. Monica says don't. Don't automatically do that. You'll end up with a ton of indexes named something similar to DTA underscore blah, 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 blah. And then I'm gonna come and bop you upside the head because I knew you let it do it by itself and you end up with a mess with a lot of duplicate indexes and such. So there's things out there that makes it really smart and really helpful. And then if time allows, we'll dive into the portal and I'll show you some examples and I'll show you where to find this stuff. I've got a lot of screenshots in here, so when I upload my deck, you'll have everything you need if you don't have access to the portal and play around with it now. Sound good? Great. I see a lot of heads nodding. That means everybody's awake, which is wonderful. Okay, so what is Azure SQL Database? Before everybody walked in, I had you guys raise your hand whether you're actually using Azure SQL Database. And it looked about 80% in the room. So that's really great, which means I don't have to spend a ton of time on this. So I'll breeze through it just a little bit so everybody gets the same idea of where I am. And then we'll get to the meat, okay? So if you're using Azure SQL Database, then you are actually using Microsoft's hardware. You're on their physical hardware, you're on their server, and you're taking a database, right? You're using their system database, you're using their TempDB, you're using their hardware, their storage, everything else like that. It's fully managed, and it has some automatic tuning, and this is where management decides, I don't need a DBA anymore. I've got a fully managed database. My backups are taken care of. My upgrades are taken care of. I really don't need to have a full team of DBAs running everything now because Microsoft's handling it, right? And when I need to restore, it's a click of a button. I can get my devs to click a button. I don't necessarily need the expensive DBA to do that, right? This is where people go wrong. And this is where everybody says, hey, our DBA is still relevant and all of that kind of stuff. When we go to these kind of platforms, the big thing is tuning and monitoring and maintenance still has to happen on an Azure SQL database. You still have to index tune. You still have to run index maintenance. Those stats still have to be maintained. You've got to make sure the stats exist. You've got to make sure they're up to date because that all is part of our query plans, right? Getting the best information still there. All of that's still there. Now we're missing some things because we are on a database level. We're not on a server level, right? So we miss some things when it comes to tuning, and there's some things that we have to adjust on what exactly we're maintaining and what we have available to us for performance tuning. So there's some DMVs that we no longer have because it's on a server level. There's some commands that we can no longer do. DBCC free proc cache, don't do that in prod. I will again bop you upside your head, but we can't do things like that because it's on a server level now. So we're now on a database scoped, but there's still performance tuning that needs to happen. There's database scoped configurations that are there. You still have to optimize for ad hoc workloads. You still have to have it set to update stats asynchronous. That's a hint. You should be updating your stats asynchronous on your auto statistics. There's certain things that you still need to do even though it's inside Azure SQL Database. Now, my colleague brought up in his session today, there's one thing too. Yes, they do the upgrades for you. Yes, they do the patching. But your compatibility level, when you actually created that database, maybe you created it in 2017, as we're going up to higher levels, you have to actually change your compatibility mode to take advantage of the latest and greatest inside Azure SQL Database. Maybe if you were a dev, you didn't know that. Maybe your DBA needs to know what a compatibility level is and how to take advantage of all the new things coming forward and the latest and greatest parts of SQL Server. There's lots of things that still actually has to happen that you need to be involved with and make logical decisions for. So tuning components. When you tune, you gotta be able to know what's going on. So we have 3 things that are really important when it comes to Azure SQL Database that you should be playing a part of. The last one is what we're really gonna get into as the secret thing. Azure Metrics. This is your monitoring and your dashboards. This is what your management really likes to see, right? This is gonna be your CPU use, your I/O. Your DTU, if you're running on a DTU model, you can see how many DTUs you're consuming inside your database. You can actually set up metrics across your entire farm. You have multiple databases, multiple subscriptions. You can create metrics, pin them to a dashboard, and see your entire environment in one dashboard. Management loves that, right? When somebody says CPU is real high, I see that CPU or DTU consumption is high. Maybe we need to scale up to the next tier. You have all of that available information inside Azure Metrics. That's number one. That's monitoring, seeing what your workload is doing in things like CPU and I/O consumption, things like that. All of you hopefully are actually familiar with that piece. The next part is Query Performance Insight. This is what I love. The backbone of it with Query Store. It brings in all the information on the query level and actually gets you everything you need to have, like face forward. I can see the top 5 queries running right now. I can see what my consumption is over the last 24 hours and see if there is a query standing out that was taking all of my resources and find a problem just like that. We can drill into that and actually get the query text. We can get the lovely query ID that I can tie back to Query Store inside SSMS and really dig and see over the last 30 days, how has this been running? Can I force a plan? Can I take advantage of everything inside Query Store, inside Azure SQL Database? That's the query identification. That is really important. I live and breathe in that all the time. The second is Azure SQL Analytics. And this is the part that people forget to turn on, and I'll actually show you. This takes part using Azure log analytics. It's actually going to grab information, your wait stats, your deadlocks, some other things that I'll show you that you can turn on, and start to store all that for you in blob storage or in wherever storage you decide to put it in. And I can get to that and bring it up in graphs for my entire farm and see all that information. It's really cool, but that's the missing piece. So there's 3 pieces. You want to look and find everything in metrics. Your queries, you need to dig down to the query level, and then get your analytics, the really good meat that the DBAs love to see when it comes to deadlocks and blocking and all of that. So to monitor, here's a screenshot of what it is. I'm just gonna point out a few things here. So what I like to do is add metrics. So I'm here on the blade. If you go down to monitoring, it's metrics. You'll find this where you can actually go to add metrics, and I can add metrics such as data I/O percentage. I've got log I/O. We've got deadlocks shown on this one. There's some actual setup drop downs that you can pick which metrics that you want to have. Obviously, it has each item down here, builds the graph of all the important information that you care about, and you can actually go and click the pin to dashboard. And that's what gets really good. You start to bring this and create one for each one of the databases, pin to dashboard, and you get this big, giant dashboard of your environment in which you can actually sit there and watch live of what's going on or go back in time. You'll see the control time part up there I've got in gold. You can change this to current time. You can change this to last month. You can change this to last week. When somebody said things were running slow last week and you see that CPU spike, you have that information. If they say every Tuesday it seems to slow down around lunchtime, you can go back and look at last Tuesdays, the month before, or whatever. Very, very useful to do. Then you can create the dashboard and you're able to get to that information. So this is in metrics. I like to have this set up. I do it for all the environments, make the dashboard, and then share that dashboard out to management, et cetera. And that's right under metrics. It's really easy. Now, what is the gotcha? It holds 45 days. So you have a 45-day moving scale window. So when you try to go back and look at what's happened and you need to go back farther than that, you're kind of out of luck. But it is 45 days. So just keep that in mind. You can pull that information out or maybe screenshot if you got to go back and check the following month and compare or whatever you've got to do associated with that. So hopefully everybody's using this. Yes?
One quick question on the CPU usage.
Uh-huh.
It says 0.4500%. Is it 0.4% or is it 0.5%?
That is 0.45. That is not 45%. It'll put it in the front. So yeah, this is just one that's a picture that I took during something. But yeah, nothing really exciting. You'll notice my scale. My scale is really low. The scale will adjust on that. Any other questions? There's lots of metrics built into there. You can add as many lines as you want, whatever's customized for you. Like I said, I try to do that for everybody and make a big giant dashboard of all the information that I need. First step, right? This is the basic step. Really great for DTU consumption. So you can kind of monitor and see how much you're actually using versus how much you're paying for. So, Query Store, who's on 2016 or above? Hopefully everybody. Everybody who's on 26 or above has Query Store turned on. If you don't, you're missing out. I live and breathe in Query Store. Query Store lets me look really freaking smart. I can know nothing about your environment. You say, hey, things are being slow. I don't know what it is that's being slow. You've run SP who's active or whatever, and you don't quite get what's going really slow at the moment. Query Store makes me look smart. I can go into Query Store. You tell me the window. I can tell you your problem in less than 5 minutes. Majority of the time, if it has to be query related. It makes me look really freaking smart, and it can make you really look freaking smart too. But make sure you have Query Store on in your environment. It becomes the backbone for a lot of the future features inside SQL that allows them to get metrics and do some of the intelligent query processing that's coming with every single version of SQL Server. So make sure you're staying up with that and using it. So Azure uses it as well. It gathers the runtime stats. You can get regressions of queries over time. I also use it to show my performance increases. So if you're a DBA and you do some index tuning or you refactor some code, devs, you can go into Query Store and actually see, I call them the little bubbles. You have the little circle bubbles on duration or whatever it is, and maybe it ran 12 milliseconds or 12 seconds, and you get this bubble up here under duration. I put in a really great index for that query. Now the duration is 12 milliseconds versus seconds, and I can show management that bubble drop and the big performance gain that they just gotten paid for. So not only is it regressions, but you can use that to your advantage, DBAs, and make yourself really shine on the improvements. You can do that in Azure SQL Database as well. So it grabs the weight stats, your top consumers, all of this great stuff, whether you're on-prem or not. And Azure shows us, Azure SQL Database shows us really easily what kind of problems I might have in the environment straight out of the box. So here, before we were down here and we went to metrics, now I'm going on to this blade that says intelligent performance, performance overview, performance recommendations. We'll talk about both of those. And this query performance insight is where I'm going to live and breathe as a database tuner, right, as a performance person. So right here, I can tell you we had some problems. After 6 p.m., this was August 23rd, after 6 p.m., somebody ran a query that looks like it took 16% of our CPU metric there, right? Something tells me here, we've got a problem with this red query. I don't know what the red query is, but just from here, I can say in this window, which is the last 24 hours, I'm looking at CPU. Whatever this red thing is doing, it's taking up my CPU. I know what your problem is. You had CPU problems during that window, it's this red bar, right? So what's the red bar? Down here, I've got a query ID, right? If you're using Query Store, you're familiar with query IDs. I know what query, what statement, how often it ran, how much CPU it was, and I know nothing about your data. All here in pictures. Management understands pictures, right? All y'all in management? Yes. So right here, I know this red query is my problem. It looks like it executed 170 times. Maybe if I'm the dev or if I am the DBA, I know this one normally runs 5 times a day. Why is it executing 170 times a day? That's another question. Something happened and this is executing, somebody put it in a loop. Somebody's hitting my website over and over again and causing problems, right? I can identify bots. Let's say you're a big seller and you have it on sale and bots come attack, right? They're coming and hitting this thing over and over again. Maybe that's 1 million executions. I can point it out right now. You might have a bot issue, somebody's attacking your website or whatever, just by that execution number right there. Right? So that's just here. So there's things you want to pay attention to. CPU, who's your big consumers? Obviously, it's Mr. Red up here. Then you want to look at duration. Who is consuming all of my time and resources? How long is it running? And then you can actually find the problems in your environment really, really quick right? Just from this one picture inside Azure SQL Database here. And again, paying attention to those executions, I think that's something that also gets missed. Is it a normal execution 1 time a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day? And that's also a good thing when you're query tuning, right? It may be good to invest in a query that runs 1,000 times today, and you can ignore the query that runs bad twice a day. So looking at the executions and paying attention to that is really good, and it's right here. Any questions on this right now? Looks good? Everybody really familiar with this? Yes, so really, really great, makes you really smart, and you can identify things really quickly. You have the aggregations that you can pull, and your window, again, it is 45 days of information. Oh, not this one, no. So this is Query Store. Query Store is actually maintained based on data size. In there, it starts to pull things out of Query Store. When you start to run out of data, things kind of start to clear out and whatever your cleanup metric is. But that's Query Performance Insight. I can actually click on Mr. Red here, and it clicks on it, I get my query ID, and then it actually gives me the query and the information in your time interval windows. So you can see if it ran really long. This is really great. So when you see this one doesn't have duration on here, but you can see when a plan regressed. If you guys are familiar with Query Store and you know what a regression is, let's say duration between here, 30 milliseconds, average here, or I have 100 runs or whatever, and the time goes really low, and then all of a sudden you get here, now we're sitting at 16%. We were fine here, all of a sudden we hit here, I might have had a plan regression. Maybe I can go into SSMS, go and force a plan, and I get back on track really, really quickly, and I'm now back down to millisecond runs. Just from looking here, I can say, bam, I have a plan regression, because now we're running in minutes rather than milliseconds, all from right here, right? I can tell you're using Entity Framework. How do I know? See the query? You all familiar with this @p, whatever? So I can tell you the engineers are using Entity Framework. I might not be able to do much with that, but I can say all through here, all the information that's available without knowing your workload. So really, really helpful. Run stats are per hour. We'll see that's the interval, how it's aggregated inside Query Store for this demo. And again, execution counts, death by 1,000 cuts can kill you when your execution counts go way up, even though it's running in milliseconds or half a milliseconds or whatever. If you're starting to hit 1 million or 400,000 in an hour time frame, you might not catch those in SP Who's Active. You might not catch those because they're running so quickly, you're not gonna catch those runs. But if you go here and see 400,000 in an hour, each one of them taking milliseconds, but that's a lot of load, right? You can start to identify that this actually could be a problem. Death by 1,000 cuts. Questions? Okay. So this is the one everybody misses. It still says public preview when you go to it, but it's in preview forever. It hasn't changed. I looked today. It still says in preview. So you actually want to create a log analytics storage. You want to turn on log analytics, create your storage place where it actually stores the information, and then you'll have to learn something if you want to dig deeper. There's this thing called KQL, which is a new query language. It does a lot of writing for you, so all you have to do is modify and not necessarily learn a brand new language. But if you want to deep dive into some of this information, you'll have to pick up a little bit of that knowledge. You can do multiple databases to one workspace. Log Analytics creates a workspace. I can have an entire farm. I had a client that had 350 Azure SQL databases. I can bring them all into the same workspace and get them all into a big giant dashboard where I can go through their entire environment and see what's going on with the blocking and et cetera. So the shared workspace does well. You can see what you can actually log here. It gives you SQL Insights, which captures that query insight stuff that we had. Automatic tuning recommendations go in there. Query Store wait stats goes there. If there's any errors, you get the statement they truncated something and it made an error, or a column doesn't exist anymore and it got an error when it tried to run the code. It captures all of that, so you get the errors. You can start kicking those to the devs because maybe they didn't know something changed and it's actually erroring out. Database wait stats. Timeouts is a big one. And then, of course, our lovely blocking and deadlocks. It captures all of that and puts it in really great graphs that you can deep dive and figure out what was the lead blocker, what was the deadlock, who was the victim, all of that good stuff is there. So that looks like this. When you turn it on, this is one database, but it starts to give you these wonderful graphs, and you can drill into each one of these graphs. So I get the utilization of my entire environment. If there's multiple databases, you could hover over each one of those bars, and it tells you which database that is. If there was any insights or diagnostic issues, it has some tuning recommendations. We'll talk about those in a second. But this is the good stuff. This is your time, your weights. I can hover over each one of those bars with this bottom graph and see all my weights. We can see our CX packet weights. We can do our page latches. All of that information that we normally want to see as a DBA, we can still get that in Azure SQL Database. And I know a lot of people who haven't turned this on and are just like really wanting that information to get the blocks, or they're finding other ways to like run SP who's active and log it to a table or whatever they're doing to get that kind of information. If you turn this on and start gathering the stats, it does cost you more money because you have a storage account associated with it, and it is gathering information, so it's another accrued cost. But it is worth it to get the amount of detail that you'll have available to you to make some informed decision and figure out what's going on inside your database. So it has the number of blocking events. That's always great. And then we can dig into each one of these to get it. Your timeouts, your errors, of course, the query durations, and your weights for the queries that it's waiting on. Okay? So, I'm going to go through this before we go to the demos here. So this is the gotchas that gets me so mad every single time when it happens. If you create a readable secondary and you're using the readable secondary for reporting, right? It's really great because now people can run crazy queries, crazy reports, and it doesn't interfere with your production workload. But when I'm performance tuning, it drives me crazy because they'll say this report runs really long, or I'm having all of these issues. Can you tune this secondary? And I've become so reliant on Query Store and able to really find things quickly because it gives me so much information that when I see this, I want to cry. I'm like, it's not a readable secondary. Darn, I hate that. It's because this information up here, Query Store represents the information on your primary. So whatever your primary workload is, it populates Query Store, and that gets replicated to all of your secondaries. So when I'm looking at this wonderful graph on the secondary, it has nothing to do with all the reports and queries that were run on my secondary. It's my primary database workload. I get so sad. I'm like, oh no, it's a secondary. I can't do anything about it. So if I were to look at both of these graphs from my primary and my secondary, they're identical, and it hurts. But so what's really great is 2022 has nothing to do with Azure SQL Database yet. I'm sad. But 2022 in box right now, they are working on and using Query Store on secondaries. So you start to get the Query Store information that represents your secondary workload. It has not made it to Azure SQL Database yet. I am hopeful and can't wait for that to actually occur. But right now, if you are living and breathing inside Azure SQL Database, you still get that lovely warning, and you're still going to be, sad, like I am. But it's coming. When I saw that, I was so excited to see that that's coming our way. So automatic tuning. How many of you guys love when SQL Server does things for you? Not intelligent query processing, because I'm a lazy DBA. Go with the intelligent query processing all day long. If you can fix my memory grants and my DOP stuff that's coming, I'm very happy. But I do not want the server to create an index or drop an index for me. Who wants that? Don't raise your hand. Are you a manager? You don't want the DBA. Okay. I was like, you don't want a DBA. You want it to manage it for you. I am all for automatic tuning when it forces a plan. When it watches for regressions, it's looking at your query store information, it's looking at all the runtime stats. It makes a determination you have a plan regression. Let me automatically force a plan to correct it. I know this last plan was a good plan. I'm going to force the plan, and I'm going to head and get you back on track. So I don't get a call 2 o'clock in the morning, things are running slow, and now I have to go and manually force a plan. I'm okay with it doing the automatic plan correction and correcting it for me. I'm not okay with it automatically creating indexes and dropping indexes. Now, when they actually develop these, they plan to do no harm, right? So they'll actually run some tests in the background, and if it didn't do well for your environment, it reverts it back. All well and dandy. However, I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to make determinations. Is this a duplicate index? Are the fields in the right order? Because we all know when there's a missing index and they give that missing index hint to you, it is in table order, field order, right? It might not be in the best order of what you actually need your index for those particular statements, right? You have a question, sir? What about statistics? It can update my statistics all day long. I am good. Give me the most current statistics based on that counter, because it's watching that counter and determine if it needs an auto statistic of the amount of change that's happening all day long, sir. I want that updated. But I'm probably also going to set a update statistics job, depending on my workload and my data change, to make sure those are staying current. But yes, but in here, these are the options that it gives you inside Azure SQL Database here. So what it does is it does have a rollback mechanism. It does actually give you what it recommends for 24 to 48 hours, so you can determine whether you want to implement it or not. Then they kind of fall off as it redetermines what you're going to need and what you're not going to need. It looks like this. So it'll give you, if you've got this turned on, it will give you, it wants to drop this index. It does some validating, and then it drops it, right? It goes through and says, it's another one that wants to drop this index here as a duplicate index. It says it wants to create an index here because it thinks you need it. And then we'll see that this one, it actually wanted to create an index, but it reverted it back because it didn't do what it needed to do. Yeah, hi. Oh, question on the screen? What? Awesome. Thanks. Erlen, I appreciate that. Query store is stored in MDF. So the secondary query store, where is it stored? How does that work with a failover? So query store right now is on the primary. So it's always going to be on the primary. So if it fails over, your query store goes to the secondary. It holds all the information. And that same query store comes back over to the other side. So it follows. You get one query store when it comes to this. As you go to 2022, lots more logic behind that. I don't know all the details. I know they're making it work. But for right now, your query store fails over with you, and that data stays with you. That data is also persisted through a refresh. When you restart your server, query store keeps all that information. So it's not like when you do indexes and all those stats get reset when you restart your server or whatever you do to restart your box. All of it is persisted, so all that information is there. Good question. So here's the drop index. You can see it had success, and it gives you an idea of what it has and what it wants to do. I don't like that. I want it to actually give me a recommendation. I don't have a screenshot of this, but if I didn't have it actually turned on here where I have it off means that it's still going to give me the recommendations, but it's not going to implement it. So I can go into this automatic tuning, and it'll have a list. I wish I had a screenshot. I'll have to change that. It'll have a list of its recommendations. I can click on it, and it'll give me the exact script of how to add the index. Then I can actually go and do what I'm supposed to do before adding an index. I'm going to check for a duplicate. I'm going to check for my data. Right? Does the fields make sense in that order? Is this truly how we use the data? Is it covering something, right? Do I have an existing index that all I have to do is modify by having an included column so I'm not creating a duplicate index? I'm doing all the analysis a DBA is needed to do to determine if that's a viable index for our environment or not, including the drop. If it says it's a duplicate index and it wants to drop it, fantastic, let me do the analysis. Let's see how many seeks are happening on it. Let's see what's using it. Let's see what it's going to use instead. Let's go and really deep dive into what our index requirements are for our data. Okay? It's not doing that. It has some logic that gives it some indication it can be dropped, but I want to double check it. Again, it'll give me the script, and I can take that and hold it off for my maybe monthly index review that I might do or quarterly index review that I want to do, and I can go back and look at that recommendation in detail. Yes, sir? No. That'd be great. That would be great. But, inside Query Store, we could dig For missing indexes, we can do some other queries that pull missing indexes. For the drop, we can run some other queries to figure out where our duplicate indexes are and drop recommendations, things like that. But that does not give us this in the script.
Will it enforce the plan? Let's say after a while it no longer relevant. Will it enforce itself?
Yeah, you can enforce a plan. No, so it doesn't unforce a plan, but if a plan leaves cache, or if there's another better plan, it might ignore the forced plan. And you can tell inside Query Store if there was a reason why a plan force is no longer being used. So there's lots of reasons why a plan might not be forced any longer. Okay? All right, so let's go and take a look at a demo here. If we can get things to work, it would be wonderful. Okay, so all of you guys have seen the portal before. If not, I hope you're playing around in Azure using the free resources that you can get out there and play around. Here is Azure SQL Database. I actually have 2 databases set up. It's just an AdventureWorks 2017 copy in which I have geo-replicated a secondary, so you guys can see that wonderful Query Store message. And I can show you that that's really happens, and you guys can cry with me. So here is my AdventureWorks database. I told you, you can find everything you need. Here's your overview. You have your pricing tier here. You have your server name. You have some usage, and you have some DTU information here. But I usually skip this part, because I've seen it once, I've seen it twice, I really don't care. I'm getting down to the meat, and that's when I come down here. When I go to metrics, this is where I'm able to start to build out my dashboards. If you go to metrics here, it actually says namespace is SQL Database. Here's some basic metrics here that you can do your data I/O, your DTU limits. These are all the options that you have available just by scrolling down. You'll get your aggregations, your min, max, all that great stuff. And you can start to populate this graph and then pin it and save it to a shared dashboard. That's the good stuff you can do to start to interact with Grafana and stuff like that, so you can really dig into it, line charts, all of that good stuff. Once you take the time to build these out and put them into a dashboard, you don't have to touch them again. You just have the dashboard that has all the wonderful stuff that you want to track going forward and your management wants to see. Right? So that's the metrics, getting us the basic stuff that we need to kind of know that there's been a problem. Not how to fix it, but there's been a problem. And you can go back in time to your time here. It's in local time, or you can go to UTC, which is helpful. And then you can go over the last 30 days, and that custom won't allow you to go past a 45-day window. So things to keep in mind. Refresh it, share it. All of that good stuff is right here. So the other part I want to show you is this diagnostic settings. Okay, everybody paying attention who does not have their blocking, etc. This is where you want to go. Diagnostic settings. It's going to have you first create a log analytics workspace. Once you have a log analytics workspace, that's where it's going to house all of this information. And this is the name of my log analytics workspace. I don't have time to go through and tell you how to set it up. Quick and easy. If it's not there, it's going to ask, do you have a log analytics workspace? You create one. Once you do, you want to go to edit settings. And this is all your good stuff. You want to check everything. You want the blocks, you want the deadlocks, you want the timeouts, all of that. I just do the basic metrics here, because remember, this all costs money. I want to get what I need to actually do my job. So this is the good stuff, the runtime stats, the waits, the errors, timeouts, and these lovely blockings, who is so important to grab to the blockings. I tell it my subscription, I tell it the log analytics workspace that I want to push all the information to, and it's off and running. I hit save and good to go. Now, what I don't want you to do, don't go through and check all of these boxes. Do not click this audit box. When you click this audit box, you need to open your checkbook, okay? So everybody wants to say, yes, I'm going to click the audit, and it brings you 2 other options where it can grab all the statements, and then it can grab some, I think it's DDL stuff that's in there of changes and all this good stuff. Don't make the mistake and turn it on. I'm thinking I want to turn everything. Let's grab it. Wonderful. No, your bill's going to go through the roof. Unless you have specific reasons to audit, determine what it audits and what you really need, don't turn those on. because to turn them off, it's kind of tricky. Like when you go and uncheck something, the other parts check and recheck, and you think you've turned it off, and a month later, your bill is high again, and it's really, truly on. Don't ask me how I know. My client is very aware. So anyhow, so turn those on. Once you turn those on, I'll show you in a minute where all that great information goes. Actually, I'll show you now because we're going to run out of time. I want to make sure you see it. Great. So when I go to my Log Analytics workspace, I named it that. I am going to scroll down. Now, don't be concerned about this, because this morning I was freaking out. I'm like, I'm going to demo this, and it has the word deprecated. So I'm like, oh my God, all my demos are going out the window. I'm going to tell them to do something deprecated. Has nothing to do with Azure SQL Database. We're all good. So you're going to go to this workspace summary, and it's going to pull this up. Depending on how many databases you might have, it might be 60 databases, it might be 100 databases. However you set this up to go to the one shared Log Analytics. I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see this lovely Azure SQL Analytics preview. It's been preview like that since I've ever used it, so that hasn't changed. You will get a list of all of your databases here. I can click on each database, and it'll give me just the metrics for that database. If I don't have it clicked, it's my entire farm. And if I hovered over it, it would tell me which database the details were for. So depending on what's there, you'll start to get all the great stuff. Your query durations, your errors, your deadlocks. If there was blocking during the time, I could click on the bar for the blocking. It would tell me the 2 things that were involved, or 3 things were involved, who the lead blocker was. It would give me the query hash. It would give me the query statement ID that was running. And sometimes, and I can't recall right now because there's not an example here, I think I get part of the text onto that. So I'm able to dig a little further. But play around in it. It's great. Finding these errors for the devs is fantastic, because when you click on the error, it'll actually bring it in here. And if I had one, there's 333 errors on this workload that I'm using. Not my script, somebody else's script. And it'll actually dig in and tell you what kind of error it is, and an error code associated with it. And again, like if a field is missing or the wrong object or whatever it's calling, really, really useful for you guys. Again, I can get to statement information inside of here, and as well as my weights. I've got CPU weights, I've got network I/O weights, and I've got some unknown weight that I would have to dig into each one for all of this. So really great details all in here that a lot of people are missing. This is the missing thing for a lot of environments that I find. Once you turn it on, you're really a happy DBA, and you can get the stuff that you've been missing on top of your workload. So there's that. When I go back to my database here, we can go and look at the other things here. The Query Performance Insight is where I live and breathe. That is the graph that I showed you. So I could find Mr. Red and figure out what my queries that are running long. It lists them down here. This, again, is my total CPU of 32. I know this is my culprit. I can click into that one and actually get the statement. And then I can go over time and look at it. I can copy the query text out. And what I do, because I love breadcrumbs, I'm all about Scooby-Doo, I want to take the information here and dig deeper. So what I'm going to grab here is this query ID, 31124. You should see my desk at home. I always have a piece of paper because I live and breathe inside Query Store. I know you do too. If you have a piece of paper and all it is a bunch of numbers, and they're all query IDs, and you've got to trace it back. So in this case, I'm taking 31124 in this window. Thank goodness. I can actually copy that number. But look what I can do. All my information in Azure SQL Database. I'm back into SSMS, where I love to live and breathe. I connect to my Azure SQL Database here. I go into Query Store like I normally would. I'm going to go into Track Queries, paste that query ID in here, hit Run, and I'm going to start digging into that plan. I'm going to go and look at it over time, over the last month. What exactly has it been doing? The logical reads. I live and breathe in logical reads. If I can get those logical reads down, I know I'm doing some good job with my indexing or with code changes, et cetera. So I can get all this information for Azure SQL DB just like I can for my on-prem database or my Azure VMs. So I'm going to take these back, and I'm going to Scooby-Doo the heck out of it, and I'm going to start going into plans. This, ma'am, is where you can find your force plan, or you want to unforce a plan. I can do it right here. If I went to queries with forced plans, I can see all the queries that have been forced here, And if I wanted to undo that force plan or see if it's being used, I would be able to see it here, and it would give me a reason of why that force plan, thank you very much, why that force plan was not being used any longer. So that's where you would find that and unforce it if you wanted to. Okay? So that's how I take that back. I'm going to go and do all the stuff I do in Query Store like I normally would, my Azure SQL Database. I'm going to start inside the portal. I'm going to go to that Query Insights, grabbing those query IDs and digging further over time, probably in here instead. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get a call that says that report on my readable secondary is running really long. Can you help me tune it? And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to cry, because if you look at Query Performance Insights, my picture is, again, exactly as it is on my primary, and I get this lovely little warning that reminds me that it is my primary database. So that's what happens when you have those wonderful readable secondaries, which I'm all for, except for when I have to tune them. So there's that. Again, that's the readable secondary. Let me see, I've got 4 minutes. Let's see if there's anything else. Here is your automatic tuning. It's right under here, like I had in the screenshot. Here's where you can turn them off and on for each one. I like to actually have it on for the force plans, off here, and by default, it's off. You'll notice that it tells you right here when it's inherited. At one point in time, they had them on, and I was really happy when they took that default out. So the force plan is on, so we're always getting that benefit. The other two are off. If I have recommendations, I can go to performance recommendations here. Hopefully I have one I can show you. Aha, I have a create index, and it says the high impact index. So we can click on this, and it'll tell me how much disk space it's going to need. I wish I had that when I was creating indexes on a regular database. I wish it was going to tell me you're about to double the size of the database by adding this index. I wish I knew that without calculating. But I know you've got automatic tuning and creation of indexes on. If I go in your environment and I see NCI, it's just like those old DTA ones that used to be added or used to add, but now it's NCI, so you can tell they came straight from here. It'll tell you the table, the schema, the key indexes, and what included columns are here. Then I can go to this lovely view script, and I can make decisions, and right now you cannot change the naming convention of this. So it will always add them as NCI. So if you're like naming standards like I do, my OCD loves when things are named logically, and the same throughout. If you use this, it's going to be NCI. So the best way to circumvent that is to go here and script it out, bring it into SSMS, make some decisions, some really good decisions before adding this, do your naming convention and add them yourself. Okay, but you can get to the recommendations, which is great. So if you want something to do, if you're having a slow day or you want to have a non-brain day, where you just kind of go in here, you could just pull them all out and start taking a look at them or whatever as it does it. So it'll put the impact, it gives you the recommendations, gives you a little bit more information. Really useful there. Performance overview is going to give you the recommendations, some automatic tuning things, and it starts with the top 5 CPU consumptions here. I don't necessarily live and breathe in this one, because I'm going to get more detail by going into the individual blades here. It's just kind of there like that first page. Once you know it, it's kind of there, and you kind of skip over it and go to the meat. So that's all I have. I have 2 minutes left. I am going to skip back so you guys can see my QR code and put it on the screen. I love feedback. Please give me your feedback. I'll grab your question in just a second. I actually change my sessions all of the time based on feedback. I love feedback. I do know I talk fast, so you can write that down as many times as you want. That'll never change. I've been doing it forever. In my daily life, I talk fast as it is. So I apologize for those who speak a different language. It's just my normal speed. Like I said, you see me on espresso, it's a lot faster, so you guys get the lower end. So please give me all the feedback possible, good, bad, ugly. I can take it. If there's anything you would have liked to seen longer, or you didn't need, I would love to know that too, because I can make some changes, especially this is 50 minutes. I really like to give this one in about 70, 80 minutes, so we can dig and see some real examples. Unfortunately, we get a 50-minute time window here, so I can't do it. So if there was other things you'd like to see, I'd like to know about it. You can follow up with any questions whatsoever. Via Twitter is the best way to get me, but my email is here. We are traveling for a few more days, so if I don't get back, I do follow back up and make sure you have it. So your question?
On the metrics, the DTU usage graphs are pretty naff. They don't seem to work that well. Microsoft have acknowledged the problem.
So I haven't run into that issue. I don't know. In the environments in which I've had to watch the DTU, it's helped a lot. If I am scaled at a lower DTU level and I find we're hitting 80, 90% all of the time, it may be a candidate for me to scale up. And I'll scale up. Or if I'm on DTU and I'm barely consuming anything, I can get a pretty clear indication. If our DTU is up here, we're way down here, I might be paying too much money because I'm on too high of a DTU level. I have not run into that being a bad metric. It's very possible that it is. I appreciate you sharing that, but I don't have any information on that.
There are quite a few where it looks great,
But it's not. And it's all because of the level that you're.
even tools like aggregation, tag off max, because you end up with a big jump across the top. Reference to like, it's still not right, and apparently it is a non-issue.
Interesting. I haven't run into that, so thanks for sharing it. I appreciate it. If you guys are using that, you might want to look a little deeper on that. Anything else? Yeah, so the slides get shared through, I believe, SQLBits has us upload those. However, all of my slide decks are on my website, SQLespresso.com. I'm huge on performance tuning, so you can get some other slide decks out there, performance tuning checklists and a bunch of things you can use your environment. This one is there, so you can go and grab that on your own. It's right under sessions. Pull it whenever you need it. Anything else? Yes, sir. Should you configure the audit? How to configure the audit? Yes. So when you click that for audit, it's going to bring up 2 more boxes, and it tells you which type of audit you want. And so you can look at the definition of which level of that is, and then you can check which one or both. Okay? All right, I am out of time. We are the last session, so I can stay just for a couple minutes more for questions. But thank you all for sticking with me for the end of the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and remember to please give me feedback. Thank you.